Okay, for the sake of the video and the audio, I'm Scott Conway, PhD, JD. We're talking about 4P360. Obviously, everyone who's here knows who I am. But the part of 4P360 we're going to talk about is where do you start leadership? Because in 4P360, we already know what the four pillars are. The four pillars are being powerful, being practical, being principled, and being positive. So if this is me, and I'm learning leadership. Well, of course, normally we think of leadership. Traditional leadership is I lead down. I lead the people that report to me. I lead the people that follow me. I lead the people that I have the authority to give orders and instructions to. Conventional 360 leadership, of course, also includes leading sideways, leading to your peers, being able to lead people you do not have line authority over. And 360-degree leadership also includes leading up. So you have these three basic directions, leading down, leading sideways, and leading up. Now in our 4P360, we also talk about diagonal down leadership, leading people who are the followers of your peers, the followers of other people you may have relationship with where you do not have line authority, but you are kind of higher up on the food chain than them, and leading in upward diagonals. Now I know we have kind of an 8 direction shape here, but what we're actually looking at here is 5 directions because for all intents and purposes, both up diagonals are the same and down diagonals are the same. So we have 1, 2, this is also part of 2, we have 3, we have 4, of course this would also be part of 4, and then 5, and 5. Now a big part of our double O feature, the double O feature in 4P360, we have O1, which is self, and so that is how do I lead me. The O2 is reverse leadership, and that is how do I help other people lead me. So how do I help my leader lead me? How do I help my direct reports lead me? How do I help my peers lead me? Because leadership is influence, so anytime someone's going to have influence over you, they have a leadership role in your life. And part of this is you're looking at this diagram figuring, okay, we've got 7 directions here. Of the 7 directions, if I am the absolute #1 person in my company, I own the business, I have no peers. Everybody who's there is underneath me. Everybody who's there is a direct report or a direct report of a direct report. So then here I am. Well, I have no up to lead because there's no one above me. I have no sideways to lead because I have no peers. I have no up diagonal to lead because, again, there's no one above me and there's no peer of anyone above me. So all of my leadership is going to be downward leadership. Now, I might do a variation of the down diagonal when I'm more directly leading someone who is a direct report of a direct report. And so it's easy to see in a company that I might end up in a situation where I might learn 4P360 that I only have 1, maybe 2 directions to lead. And it might actually end up looking like, ironically enough, that the top leader actually has the least need for this kind of leadership. If we look at the bottom side of it, you have someone who's at the bottom of the totem pole. They don't have any direct reports. There is nobody that reports to them. The highest level people that they have are the peers. So there's no one down below them. There's no one down diagonal. So everyone is either peers above them or upward diagonal. And so there you have 3 of the directions are still there. Now here's where part of the power of this is most evident. If you are not the top leader, say if you have the owner of the company, and maybe you have the executive vice president, and then you have the people down at the very bottom who don't have direct reports, 4P360 most clearly applies in this whole middle section. Everyone who has 1 or more direct reports, and everyone who has 1 or more people above them that they report to. So that these people do have an up, they do have a down, they do have a sideways, and they do have the diagonals. And then you're going to have the use for every single direction of the 4P360. So when you begin to look at the application of this, you can begin to see that this style of leadership, this actual system of leadership, has applicability even for your brand new people. Now, one of the big things to keep in mind, even if you're at the top, you might look at, okay, well, I have no up diagonal, I have no peers. So that eliminates 3 of the directions. Well, how many directions are involved in 4P360? 7. So that means you still have 4 of the 7. Now, how powerful is it if you are the top leader and you have people reporting to you, giving you information you have to make decisions on? And if you have to make the decision, that information is coming up to you from a variety of directions. Is it helpful for you to be able to train them in how to bring that information to you? Well, that is the reverse leadership. How are you going to do the reverse leadership? How are you going to teach them to come to you? Well, with 4P360, you're going to teach them to come to you. Give me the information I need, the powerful information that will help me actually make the decision. Give me the practical information. So I need to know what's actually actionable. Don't just give me, kind of big picture thing. I need to know the nuts and the bolts too. Give me the principles involved so that I can understand what's going on and why it is this way, if there is a reason. Because sometimes there's a reason for something that might not be evident, and you need to know what that is, because if you make a decision that changes something, and now that thing changes, but the reasons it was there in the first place have not been addressed. Maybe there was a problem that system was solving. It may have been unintended consequences, creating other problems, but it was solving one, and when you switch it to something else, you may recreate that problem. So you need the principles involved. And you would like the information to be positive. Don't just tell me what's wrong, tell me what we can do. Don't just complain to me, give me actual actionable information that we can do something about. So it's not just a gripe fest. And so that reverse leadership element still takes place. Obviously, the self-leadership always takes place because there's always a self to lead. And so these key components of the 4P360 are always in place, and of course, leading down in your various downward directions. Of being able to take this in and build a team that wants to work with you. And so that is huge if you're at the top. If you're at the very bottom, and you have no direct reports, no peers of direct reports, pretty much by definition, and so you've lost 2 of the directions. Well, you still have 5 of them, and it's the same thing. How can this person help their leaders, help influence their leaders, help bring the information to their leaders that will help make the leaders' decision-making clean and easy, and all the upward diagonal and all the self-leadership issues are still there. But now let's take a look even at the very top. Because this is a system of leadership, a system of how you utilize your influence no matter where you are. Suppose I own my company. I have no one over me. I am not a direct report to anyone. I don't even answer to shareholders. I own the company. I don't have any peers. There's no upward diagonal, downward diagonal. I just have everyone, straight down below me. And you go, okay, well, I'm only getting one of these directions. Well, I am still getting, of course, the self-leadership and the reverse leadership. So I get 3 of the 7 directions. But do I have a personal life? I may not have peers in my company. I may not be applying 4P360 in all 7 directions in my company, but do I have a life? If I have a life, suppose I have a spouse. Well, my spouse would be a peer. My wife is not a direct report. I don't tell her what to do and say jump and she says how high. It doesn't come down until I tell her to. She is a peer. And so I get this diagonal leadership at home. If I have kids, well, the kids would be like a direct report. When I have my friends' kids or my kids' friends, either way, that's a downward diagonal. And then when I'm talking about the leading up and the leading upward diagonal, it might be other people that may think they have authority over me or may actually have some authority. What happens when I go to the school? Who has authority over my kid? Well, they have authority over my kids down here, but I don't get to dictate school policy. They dictate school policy. They dictate the subject matter. They dictate what's on the test. And so that becomes like leading in an upward diagonal. I'm trying to have influence in a place that has authority over someone in my life, who has authority, has an impact I want to have. They get to call the shots. It's ultimately their decision. I don't get to tell them what to do, but I need to influence them in how something gets done. And as far as someone who thinks they have direct authority over me, are there regulators that may have direct authority over you in your business, in your personal life, your parents? Certainly, I probably don't have any authority over my mother. Sometimes she thinks she has some authority over me. I deal with her a lot like I would deal with someone I'm trying to influence up, because I can't tell her what to do, but neither can she tell me what to do. Now, in that sense, she's really honestly more of a peer. But because she's the mom, She thinks that she should have a level of say because she's the mom. And so I work with her just like I would lead up. And so when you're beginning to look at the power of the 4P360, you see everywhere in your life it can apply. This can go in every direction and in every area of your life. So when you're dealing with leadership, most leadership isn't actually a leadership system. It's a leadership style. And people have different styles. Sometimes people have styles that work. Sometimes people have styles that don't work. There's a lot of things in leadership that when you look at your leadership, you have things that do work, you have things that don't work. You have things that are because of, and you have things that are in spite of. When you have a part of your leadership that is a because of, that is because I have this trait, because I do this thing, I create this result. Other parts of it are in spite of, is even though I have this trait, even though I do this thing, I've still somehow managed to succeed. And this is in your personal life as well as in your professional life. And so when you're looking at some of these things and you have an actual system, the system will help you determine more of what's the because of, what's the in spite of. When you just have a leadership style that's very individual, you might just lump all of these together. There are people who actually honestly believe that part of their success in leadership is because they're so mean. The part of their success in leadership is because they beat people down. The part of their success in leadership is because they yell at people, because they scream at people. The part of their success in leadership is because they don't listen to anybody. And they really think that's part of the because that's their style. But when you have an actual leadership system, you see, okay, well, that's very negative. Is sometimes negative necessary? Yes, sometimes negative is necessary. But is it being used in ways that's burdening down the relationship so that when it does become necessary, it's just more of the same? Now, by the way, when a generally positive 4P360 leader goes negative, like all of a sudden, it is shocking to people, which makes it that much more powerful. So when you tell someone, look, I have tried to be nice about this. I have tried to behave like professionals, expecting that you are going to be able to step up and do this, and that hasn't happened. And you push, and that is unusual. That is shocking. But when you do it all the time, when you're known as someone who pitches fits, known as someone who throws tantrums, known as someone who just chops people down, they ignore it because that's just them, ignore it, that's just what they do. And you lose the impact. And people who do this tend to then get more negative and more negative and more negative until you become like that one executive I talked about that would yell and scream and cuss people out, was even throwing things at executives, throwing things at professionals. Because that was his style. That's how he got things done. And when people started to ignore him, then he just escalated until eventually he created the top global competitor for the company that he worked at, because he alienated some of his very top, very best people. So with the 4P360 as an actual system, you have a system of leadership that allows you to evaluate every element of anyone's leadership. Is it powerful? Is it actually getting the job done? Is it practical? Is there a use for it? Is it fixing the problem, or is it creating additional problems? Is it making some things worse? Is it fixing the immediate problem at the cost of a long-term problem? Is it principled? Does it work this way because it works this way for a reason? Is it based upon values? And is it positive? Does it handle this in as a positive, respectful, uplifting, connecting, relationship-building way as possible so people will want to be on your team? And as we look at these four pillars and we consider these four pillars in context of where you might be in sort of the food chain, whether at the top or the bottom, whether you're dealing with your business life or your personal life, how powerful is what you're doing? Is it actually working? Is it producing the outcome that you're actually after? Is it practical? Is it creating unintended consequences? Is it solving the short-term problem and creating a long-term problem? Is it principled? Does it have some reason that works? Do you understand the reason it works? Is it based upon values? Is it positive? Is it building connection? Is it preserving the relationship, or is it tearing down the relationship? And just by having these simple four pillars, these simple filters to take a look at everything and see, how well am I doing? And it's not going to be 100%. Every once in a while you're going to get things, especially down at the positive side, where there just doesn't seem to be a positive way to get it done. Anyone who's parented knows this. in high-stress situations where you just need obedience. Like when you're dealing with a military combat situation where there's no time for debate, there's no time for thinking, it's an emergency, decisions have to be made, they have to be made right now. Yes, there might be different ways of doing it. Yes, there might be different opinions. There is no time for that. You might not have time to be positive. And that's when it's just time for people to snap the salute, say yes, sir, and go. Even if sometimes you're yelling and screaming at people to get people to do things. Police do this a lot when they're telling people, get down, clear the room. You know, in any kind of emergency situation, you have time, so there's just no time to be positive. And so when that happens, you want to have as much of a relationship as you possibly can. On the practical side, I'll tell you one of the most common things you see on the practical side is solving a short-term problem at the cost of a long-term situation. If you want the marriage equivalent, most people can relate to, or the relationship equivalent, is you're so busy trying to win the fight, you don't realize you're destroying your relationship. The business version is you're so busy trying to win your issue, you don't realize you're destroying your career. Or you're so busy trying to win the issue, you don't realize you're about to lose that key person on your team because you're alienating them. And so sometimes, you know, in the practical side, you have to, that's part of the pick your battles. Is this something worth having this level of fight over, or can we have a much more positive fight? On the principle side, sometimes you have no idea how things work. Sometimes you have no idea why it works that way. It just does. And you have a limited ability to make a principled decision because you don't understand why it works. And that might be something worth exploring later on, but you may not have time to get to the principles. And sometimes that's okay. And what the powerful thing is it going to really work? Sometimes you just don't know. Sometimes you're experimenting. Sometimes you're taking your best guess and you're going to find out if it works, and you start off with what you believe is most likely. And so in the 4P360, as you look at these, you go, okay, these are the standards. I don't expect to always hit a level 10 on every single one of these every single time. That's my target. I might come through something and it's a question mark. I really don't know how powerful it is. This is my best guess. I'm going to take a crack at it. We're going to do this all out, or we're going to do this at a wise level of investment of time, a wise level of investment of money, a wise level of investment of energy to find out if this is going to work. On the practical, sometimes you really don't know. Or sometimes the short-term issue is big enough it's worth risking the long-term repercussions. Or sometimes you have an emergency and you really just don't know. It might have some repercussions and you may just have to deal with that later. On the principle, sometimes you don't know what the principle is, or sometimes you must violate your own values in order to get something done. Now, I don't mean do things that are wrong. What I mean is you might have things that for you, they're personal priorities. You might have, you prioritize service, but you're about to go out of business. And that you want to do these things, and you want to add all this extra value, but that's expensive, and it's hard to do, and if you do that, you have no more business. And you really don't want to go to your clients and raise your prices and start charging for things you used to do for free. You don't want to, because part of your value, your personal value, is I put the people above the profit. But if you realize your profit is plummeting and you're about to be out of business, you may have no choice. And you may have to re-examine your values and how you manifest those values in your business. So sometimes you put value on things, and the values that you place end up undermining your mission, end up undermining your goals, end up undermining your whole purpose for being here, because it then destroys your very ability to do it. And this is, by the way, a relationship thing in general. So sometimes in your marriage, you may have certain values, certain ideals you walk in with, and if you try to stick to those, you're going to lose your relationship. You're going to lose your friend. You're going to alienate your kids. That you might have your children who grow up, move out, and never want to see you again. Marine Corps general story on this one. That he was learning this basic idea of leadership of listen. People have ideas. Listen, when you were coming up the ranks, you knew you had some ideas that you thought the people above you would benefit from listening. Now that you're the general, you're not listening to anybody. And as they did an exercise called When I Get Better At, as he got around enough times, he got past the sarcastic comments, he got past the trite comments, it suddenly occurred to him that when I get better at listening, maybe my children will talk to me again. Began to realize what he did at work, he did at home. And so what he had to do is take his value of, I make the decisions myself. I don't need to listen to anybody ever, period. I don't suffer fools lightly. and realizing that's how he was treating his kids, that's how he was treating his wife, that's how he was treating his subordinates, that's how he was treating his fellow generals and admirals. That's how he was treating the civilians. He was behaving like nobody knew anything but him. And no one could make a decision but him, and he didn't need any information from anyone to make that decision. And that he could tell everyone else what was and what to do. And that was one of his values, is I am 100% responsible, which he interpreted in his value structure as I don't listen, I just tell. And so he had to re-examine his value there when he began to realize that his value of 100% responsibility, that part's good, but the part of 100% responsibility that to him meant I don't listen, I just tell. I'm the one with the answers, nobody tells me anything. That part of his value had to go. And so sometimes you have to violate your values short term and then go re-examine them to say, okay, am I doing this value right? Because if the purpose of this value is to help connect, if the purpose of this value is to help make life better, and this value somehow is undermining my life, maybe the value needs to shift. Maybe it might still be people over profit, but maybe I need to make profit a bit higher. So maybe people are 1 over profit, not like 12 over profit. Maybe I need to still care about profit. Maybe the problem is I've been so busy taking care of people, I haven't done anything for profit, and then I can't make a living, then I can't take care of people anymore. And so you begin to examine some of the values and how they interact and how they work, but sometimes you have to do that short term and then go back and take a look at them again and see how well that's working for you. And of course we have, in the 4P360 overall system, we have a values system and how to shift, adjust, and change the definitions in those values. So all of that is included in the system. And of course being positive, we already talked about being positive. Sometimes some people just won't let you be positive. Sometimes you have to yell at them, or proverbially yell at them. So I mean, think about dealing with your kids. You might have a good kid, but if someone is stubbornly sticking to something, sometimes you have to yell at them. Sometimes you have to go negative. Sometimes you have to even threaten them. Like, you will be out of a job if this doesn't happen. Sometimes. And so long as when it does go negative, it is rare, then that gets people's attention. And when you get someone's attention, now you're having an impact. But if you do that all the time, well, then your negativity loses impact. They just assume that you're a negative person, you're just a jerk, that's just how you are. And so sometimes it's not going to be a 10, sometimes it'll be at a 1. Sometimes it might even be, at -4 or something. Sometimes you might have to stop and examine things. But because you have this 4-pillar filter, because you have a way to look at it, because you have a system, not just a style, it allows you to really dig in and take a look at all of these pieces. Even with the understanding of, okay, well, on this principle stuff, we're running about a 2. And the 2 is basically based on the fact we've never really clarified our values, and we really don't understand why things work the way they work. This is just the way we do them. But you might realize, okay, but the stuff we do does work. We're running a 10 and powerful. Sometimes we create unintended consequences and have stuff that isn't working, but that's about a 7 most of the time. And we're usually positive, but not all the time, and that's about a 6. And you can take a look at it and go, okay, well, we got this one nailed, so we don't have to work on that. You might take a look and say, okay, this is going to need some attention, because we do need to understand the principles and the values. And you might decide, well, if we know the principles, that will help us be more practical and positive, because we'll actually have a framework and everyone will know where we're coming from, and you could decide to intervene here first. Or you could decide, okay, but where negativity is showing up is doing damage, so let's focus on the positive first. And let's put our emphasis here first, and as we're trying to be more positive, then that will help us understand our values better and create the relationship and connection more so that we can establish our values and get more buy-in on it, because we can then do this as a group. And so this system of being able to rank where you are on each of the pillars then allows you to see where you want to intervene and then see how you want to intervene. Now, of course, getting the specific interventions for you personally would be more of a coaching or mentoring issue than a pure training issue. Figuring out where the specific interventions are for your company would be more of a consulting issue than just a training issue. But laying the groundwork, laying this foundation, learning how these things work, getting all of the tools and the techniques, working in all of these different directions is a training issue. And so we have the 00 feature. We have 7 different directions. I know you get the 007 for all the James Bond fans. And you get all of these fundamentals so you know, okay, I've got basic leadership leading down. I've got peer leadership to influence across, to influence up, to help take things off of my leader's table, to make things easier for my leader. And I've got those basic directions. I'm learning the skills and techniques to do the diagonal leadership, to do the self, to do the reverse. And then how do I specifically apply that to my life? How do I specifically apply that in the company that I'm running, in the division that I'm running? Then those can be more specific consulting or coaching issues. But getting the foundation down, learning the basics, having an actual system. I mean, think about how many people have an actual system of leadership, a system of influence that works in every single direction. Because if I am taking what I'm doing in one direction, one leadership technique of trying to lead down, trying to organize my company, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but I have no way to evaluate. But because you have these 7 directions, you can take any one principle, any one idea, any one technique and see, does it have an up, a sideways, a down, a diagonal up, a reverse leadership, and a self-leadership version of that works. And you begin to realize, no, it doesn't, then maybe that's a technique you don't want to be using or that you need to tweak. Do you have a technique that works in your personal life as well as your career? Are you only a professional, or do you also have a private life? Are you only a career person, or are you actually a human being with regular friends and family and contacts and other people you have a relationship with? Does your leadership system work in all of those places? Anywhere you may have influence, what are you doing? And how well are you doing it? So the 4P360 leadership system, it's for training for your employees, it's for the top person for leadership, it's for the bottom people for leadership, people who have no direct reports. It's a parenting principle. It's a child-rearing principle. It's a friendship principle. It's a relationship system. Everywhere there's human influence, human beings influencing human beings, having this system, we can walk in and take a look at this and see how well would this work in every direction. Is this the way I would counsel other people? Is this the way I want other people trained? Is this how I want my children growing up? Is this what's actually going to work? Is this going to cause unintended consequences? Is this going to be value-based and work on a system of rules? Is this going to be positive and relationship building, or is it going to be relationship destroying? How do I want to do this as a human being, a person with a whole life? You are a whole person. You have a whole life. And this is for your whole life. So that is the 4P360 leadership system as it applies, no matter where you might be in the totem pole, where it applies in both your professional life and your organization and in your private life and your family and your relationships. And how powerful a system this is when you realize, of course, you're not going to do perfect tens on every single level. You're not going to do perfect tens in every single direction. But it gives you a system to then diagnose that and say, okay, where am I going to go to work first? What do I need to do to take that 2 up to a 4? To take that 4 to a 5? What do I need to do to take that 6 to a 7? What do I need to do to take that 7 to an 8? And on some of the things, when you begin to look at it and you have a system to do that with, it allows you to be that much more powerful, that much more effective, and to master the art of practical leadership. Thank you.